two-headed in general. The play. It's coming up in April. It opens on the 16th.
I have a question about the research. So do you give it to those who are going to perform it?
Yeah, I created, my director asked me to create a textbook, which I thought was scary and ridiculous. So I put a document together with lots of pictures and things, because the internet's really good for finding pictures, and lots of the dissertations I have lots of pictures. And so I put that together, and we actually opened a Canvas page where we go section by section, and each week I meet with the cast and the actors, and we discuss certain parts of it. So the week before, we discussed polygamy was our big thing. And so I posted all of my research a week ahead, and then they came back with questions or thoughts about polygamy, and I posted that, and then we discussed it. It's a huge thing to discuss your work with other people, because it really clarifies for them, because sometimes you think you're being blatantly clear, because if you've researched something for such a long time, it makes sense to you in your brain, but when other people read it, it's like, well, I don't know what's going on. So it's really good to discuss with other people as well. Yes, sir.
Was it more than one person doing the same research?
No, I was the only one on this project, and it took a really long time.
Do you think that performing this in Utah, where a lot of the actors in the company will have a more direct correlation to the LDS Church, has an effect on you kind of having to go back and start from blank? Is it more difficult to perform this here than it would be in another place?
I think it's going to be a challenge to the community. For sure, it is a challenge to a lot of our actors. A lot of them come from LDS backgrounds, and the interesting thing, I interviewed people down in Cedar City, and the overwhelming majority of them didn't even know what the massacre was. And so I think it's going to be rough on the community to see that it happens, but our director is not so much trying to bash the LDS people as to say this happened, and we need to recognize that this horrible event happened, because it's just been swept under the rug for 100 years. So it's more of a recognition of what happened than anything else. Does that answer your question? Cool. Yeah.
So what's the storyline of the play? It's about polygamy and the massacre, but
It's a two-woman show, kind of. It follows the lives of two women over 10 years. So there's 10 scenes, and each woman, not 10 years, each scene is a decade. So they start with the children, and they're 10, and then they move up until they're 60, and each set of women is two different actors. And these women, during their childhood, they had a house up on a hill that they could see in Mountain Meadows, and they watched the massacre, and it's haunted them ever since. And so they reference it, they don't really ever say what happens. It's a story about their friendship and their fortitude. Being an early frontier woman sucked big time. I couldn't ever have done it. But it talks about the tension that a lot of women felt being sister wives, so in polygamous marriages. And it talks about how oftentimes they felt like they didn't belong, or they wanted to be loved. See, here's the thing, is that every woman wants to be loved and to have her one only love. And this show really highlights how these women who wanted to be close to God were questioning their beliefs at this point, because they felt like their men were wrong. But they believed in God, but they didn't think the men and God were together. So it's a really interesting dichotomy. And I don't want to give too much away. Yeah.
How does the research influence the play? Is it just to give the actors a better feel for where they're coming from?
Yeah, it was for the actors and the director. The director didn't want to direct anything that was inaccurate. She's very specific in a lot of shows that she's done. She wanted everything to be accurate and to the point, and she wanted to really give these girls who are in this show a really good foundation for what they were doing. It's hard. One of the main tenets of acting, and this is a total theater thing, but is honesty. You need to be honest with your audience, and if you don't know what's going on, that's not going to happen. So it was to give them a really good idea of the events and things so that they could really connect to it as their characters. Go ahead.
Have you guys come across anything that has kind of made your director change any portion of the play or change direction with it?
Yeah, actually a lot of stuff. We came across a couple of documentaries that filmed bits of it, not as it was happening, but recreated it. And our director is very broad-minded and likes to make things huge, which is really cool and really expensive. Anyway, but she has decided to project these images behind the girls as they are performing. So you see these images of people killing each other and being killed, and it's really gory and delightful. Behind them, there was another instance where we learned about a young girl. The travelers, let me back up and tell you this part of the story. The travelers were under siege for 6 days with the Indians, and they had circled their wagons. And the Mormons then decided to enter the main body of the militia. And the man entered a camp, and he had a young girl's hand in his own. And so we made a discovery in the script that this young girl talks about being there and being thrown in the wagons with all of the dead bodies and the children, that they didn't kill any children that were under 8 years old because of reasons. Anyway, but she remembers being thrown in this wagon, and so we actually decided that that character was one of the girls in the play and that she was there, and so that influenced that character a whole lot. Yes, sir.
How long did it take for you to do the research on the play?
This took me about 4 or 5 months. I normally it shouldn't take that long, but this is such a controversial issue, and there's so many voices out there, and there was a lot of research. It wasn't one specific thing I did. It was Mountain Meadows and polygamy and what was frontier life in the 1850s. You know, there was a lot of stuff. But the Mountain Meadows took the longest because it was so controversial, and there's so many voices. It took me a really long time to pick out everything. So, but like for polygamy, it took me 4 weeks, and then there it was. So sometimes yeah.
How would you take out notes that you think were not accurate, or how did you come to that decision that this was not good to include in the research?
I looked a lot at authors' biographies when I was reading through. There was one book that I had read, and I didn't even think to look at the end, and it said, this person is a neo-Nazi, former, hates people, religion. Anyway, it was awful. Other things, if it said it more than once in different accounts, so if it said it once in a survivor account and then in one of the LDS trial accounts, then I would put those two together and say, okay, that has to be something because it was mentioned in both places. So usually the repetition of something was really good, yeah.
So, it's like a general estimate, how many different resources do you think you looked at?
A lot. For polygamy, I would say I used about 12 resources. I used one dissertation that the director's sister had written in the 70s, and that was my jumping off point, and then I looked at LDS stuff. What?
Each of those had sources of their own.
Mm-hmm. And so then I just looked at the ones that seemed most pertinent to me and what I was specifically looking for when I approach my research. I don't say I want to look at polygamy. I want to look at how polygamy affected women in the 1850s. So I looked for things like that instead of just saying, here's polygamy in general, because that would be a lot of research, and I don't want to do that. Well, I'm sure somebody does. I don't. Any other questions? Oh, who wants to go first?
Obviously, in your research, you found things that contradicted each other because each side's going to have a different story to make it look like they were in the right.
Mm-hmm.
So, one story could be right and one could be wrong, and then you both have a mixture. Did you portray that in the play, that there are different sides, or did you just pick one?
Yeah, the play definitely has that it has, one of the characters is very strong, this wasn't our fault, and the other one is not. So it definitely has that tension. In my research, things that were really juicy, I put in there and said, okay, this is how one person says it, this is how one person says it. Because there are things that nobody really knows what's going on, but everybody's sure that their way is the right way, but you want to make sure you present both of that if you can. Question?
Well, I was just gonna ask, like, do you know when in April it's gonna show?
Yeah, April 16th through the 21st. It's free for students. So I should go.
Being the world's foremost expert on the Mountain Meadows Massacre, who did it?
Who did it? I don't want to say. I have my opinions about a lot of things and a lot of issues, but I think that the LDS people were paranoid, and I think that they had received a lot of abuse, and that's all I'm going to say about that. I don't think it was justified. I think it's a horrible event that could have been avoided, but that's something you guys can find out through the play. I'm not going to tell you.
It's a very political answer.
Oh, thanks. I've worked on it. You're not the first person who has asked. Great. Any other questions?
Where is it gonna be at?
It's in the Morgan Theater. So if you go out into the Fine Arts Center, do you know where the Kent Concert Hall is?
Is that to the left?
Yeah, it's to the left of that.
Where the USC